Hey, welcome to Visual Minds Learning. My name is Jeff Foster, and I just want to talk a little bit about what visual perception is. I get the question a lot, like, what is visual perception and how does it affect my child, or how does it affect learning and altogether? So, just in brief, this is the really quick video to just kind of give it just an overview of what goes on. So what I always say is I'm at the age where we remember the 35 millimeter cameras where you had the lens and then you had your aperture to open and let light in and it goes back until it hits a film. Different than what we looked at with the iPhone, it's a digital image and goes on. So back if you think about the film, that's kind of like your eyes. And so anytime you have any issues with the lens or the aperture or the film or anything in between, it causes a distortion of the image. So, but from that point, it goes in to be developed. So that's where we took it to CVS, Walmart, or mailed it in, and then you received your pictures on a little, piece of paper essentially that had your image. And so that's the processing side of it. So your eyes are very similar. You have your lens inside, you have your aperture, which is your iris, which is the color part of your eye, and then everything goes into hits that retina, which is that back film of your eye. And once it goes there, it hits your optic nerve, and that's where it's sent to the Walmart, which is your brain, and it's processing into different areas. And so there's different parts and there's different processing, and you're going to see that a lot of these activities overlap because figure ground essentially is seeing things from the background. Where's Waldo? That's a figure ground. Finding the spoon in the drawer of forks and knives and spoons and everything. And that's figure ground, finding something specific among the detail. Well, that takes visual discrimination. It takes fixation, which is fixing your eyes on an object, oculomotor skills to get your eyes there, movement. Okay. Form constancy, which is basically understanding that in different contexts, that or turned upside down, it's the same object. So a fork upside down or fork stuck on its end, it's still a fork. That's important. And then there's visual closure, which basically, if part of my fork is covered, I can still, my brain realizes that the fork is still there. And so it is still a fork, so I can grab it as well. All these little other things come in. Spatial orientation is again kind of similar to the form constancy that I recognize this where in space that particular is. So it's turned this way or turned that way, and my brain can turn it to a point where I can still recognize it. That comes to play in more of things like letters and how it's oriented the correct way. And that's where I know that it's in the position where it needs to be. Visual motor is really thought of as like eye-hand coordination, but more specifically, it's what your brain sees, your brain processes, and then puts it into motor action. So yeah, it's seeing a ball and you can catch it because your eyes know where the distance is. But it's also directing my hand toward watching that knife. And so I'm moving around the knife to get the fork, but it's also taking an image like a word and be able to process it and putting it onto paper into motor action. So that kind of there's a lot of overlap there, but it's similar to the same things. It's the same concepts there, right? And so all that together takes play. And once all that is processed, they make decisions. And so how does that affect learning? Well, we talked a little bit about the words and the letters turning and things like that. But think about reading. It seems such a simple thing. We can do it to relax. We can do it to enjoy. We can do it to when we have to learn more information. But when there's problems with any of the camera eyes, seeing the details of the letters, that's tough because you're not seeing the full images. But then anything in the processing, directing your eyes where they need to be, scanning words where they need to be, if there's any problem with seeing a letter amongst the mass of words around it, figure ground. If you know you're reading, you're not reading letter by letter to form a word, you're scanning the page. And so as a child develops speed, you need some of that visual closure so that that can happen. And be able to put those letters together to form a word and word together to form a sentence and a sentence together to form a paragraph and seeing that more in chunks so that the speed increases and so they don't miss recess. And then they can grasp the information and comprehend it. And so with all that together, there's difficulties and sometimes it's not finding out the specifics, which is something we do as form an assessment and finding out specifically what areas are troublesome. And we work on those areas with different activities to help build those skills up. sometimes starting slow, and we call it an OT, right? OTs, grading the activity or scaffolding it to make it easy first and giving them the just right challenge and then challenging them to go. And then it's research has shown to be improving in those reading skills and things like that. So it affects reading, speed, comprehension. It also affects writing. You have to be able to take that. It's the decoding, encoding, and so all that. Teachers, you know what all that means, but essentially, you break words down and you put them together to read them. You break them down to write them and letter by letter. So essentially your vision needs to be able to process that from putting together and taking apart by letter. And so all these activities are designed to, individually group and work on those skills. But if a child has specific difficulties, we do custom plans for those, or there's sample plans. If your child is having difficulty with this, you do this amount of time, this exercise for this long. It's like going to physical therapy, but it's occupational therapy, and it's more working toward being able to use those eyes to help learn. And so essentially, all of this together, reading things off the board, recognizing the dynamic movements when they go into more advanced dynamic environments, which movements. And so all this together is complicated in the brain. But when you break it down and simplify it and do different activities to work on those individual, build those foundations, and then build the challenges on top of that will help. So hopefully this was a kind of a brief overview. What I plan to do is just give you little videos. I may focus just on figure ground and just kind of go through what would be the challenges of children in school with figure ground difficulties, and then go to the next content areas, because my goal is for parents, for teachers that maybe weren't trained in this area, they gain an understanding, and with occupational therapy practitioners that are maybe rusty or just want some overview, that maybe their programs or maybe their work environment, they weren't seeing this as much. So just rubbing the dust off of those skills to be able to come back in, because again, my goal is for us all to be able to address the limitations. And so because what we want is, like I'll say each time I end this video, is to empower these students learning through their vision. So I'm excited about working with you guys. Let me know how I can help or if you have any questions.